Hey guys, it's Paul, combat veteran, MMA fighter, YouTuber, and we're back at it, doing another look at Luton's Space Marine creation. This time we've got Survival of the Fittest is the title of this chapter, so let's get into it.
Although some worlds know this more than others, planets used for recruitment usually have some form of regular combat going on. This trial is less a trial and more a means of assessing potential candidates. Astartes may have observed headhunting particularly strong champions, or they may watch them from orbit, observing infighting between tribes on Imperial feral worlds. In this trial...
Okay, so I have a question for the lore experts. When they say feral worlds, what is sort of the cutoff? Are we talking about true, like, hunter-gatherer tribes? Would, like, that picture made it look like a samurai world, like not a feral world, but a feudal world. Does the Iron Age count? Would you have a world at, like, modern technology levels? Would you consider that a feral world, like any world short of the 41st millennia's technology? Again, I'm just sort of curious as to what that term feral world means.
Recruits are tasked to head out into their homeworld and slay a beast for causing chaos or harm to their world. Many Imperial worlds...
That's actually the plot, I think, of Ghost in the Darkness, I think. It's a movie about a bush hunter in Africa who gets tasked to kill a lion that is hunting and killing members of a small tribal community. Yeah, I'm sort of curious, again, as to why the Astartes are aware of this. I'm just imagining, again, you're a 1,000 Marine chapter. How do they have the time to observe for months and months the goings-on of a young, promising candidate on a feral world, especially a singular one, right? My thought would be is that you'd want to... Again, if I was an Astartes, right, I'd want to go and I'd want to say, okay, I want this to be an efficient process. So I want the planet itself, the world itself, to do these things, to do this selection process for me. So maybe I would find maybe a tribe, but maybe a tribe with an exceptionally grueling passage to manhood ritual, and then just sort of show up and be like, hey, let's see your folks going through their passage to manhood ritual this year, and just pick up the three that seem to do the best. Or, again, find a world with a lot of ritual combat, or, like we discussed in other videos, Cadia and Krieg.
Host highly dangerous life forms or worse, orc infestations. The recruit must go out alone, or sometimes in small groups, and return with their captured hunt, often alive. With these group hunts, though, the nasty twist is that there can only be one successful recruit, so they could turn on each other, break off alone to achieve or steal victory. I personally question the validity of this test. Fighting to the death to show strength over others seems plausible, but setting out in as a group, but then betraying other recruits seems to go kind of against the traits Astartes look for in recruits.
Yeah, Luton's spot on here. This is the antithesis of what you would want in a battle brother. Again, bear in mind, as we've said in other videos, that to be an Astartes, you are your priority. And stop me, lore experts, if I'm wrong. But it seems like your priority is the chapter, right? You fight together, shoulder to shoulder as brothers. You stand and die for one another, right? You forsake all other human interactions, basically, in exchange for your membership in the chapter. So to sit there and be like, we're going to select recruits who betray others, even, again, in these ritual combat stuff, like, you're selecting recruits on their individual combat prowess is important, but you also would have to select them for their ability to work as a team, and to not select for people who can work as a team and just select for stone cold killers. Like, again, would you serve on a SEAL team with John Wayne Gacy? Would you even serve on a SEAL team with somebody like maybe John Jones, the MMA fighter, who's like a super talented fighter, but in his personal life is like maybe not a great guy. These are not a guy of high integrity, right? Certainly. That's an MMA fan every time he does an interview. I'm just like, how long before something in this interview is proven false?
Anyway, on returning home, they'll be required to slay their successful hunt in a ritual in front of their community before being led successfully away in the throes of glory. Lastly, the quite vague challenge trial. And this is exactly what it is, some form of probably unsurmountable challenge. This could be to attempt to fight a full-blown Space Marine in combat. An impossible task, you might imagine, but usually remember this is the 41st millennium and bizarre occurrences are abound. While the thought of a child fighting a Space Marine seems insane, remember the task is usually to see how they approach it, not necessarily their success. In some extremely rare situations though, the aspirant may actually beat the Space Marine challenger, as
I'll say this is actually maybe the most feasible, most viable challenge I've yet heard of, right? Because it lets a Space Marine assess directly that candidate's ability to problem solve. And depending on the exact circumstances of the trial, you could actually run it like a fair experiment. Again, I'm imagining a group of aspirants, all chosen from the same world with very similar experiences, and that the trial would either be something totally alien to all of them or totally familiar to all of them, right? As a way of sort of evening the playing field. And then being like, okay, you're going to have to hunt and kill this Astartes who has armor, who doesn't, and it's a really good chance for that Astartes to observe up close and personal how innovative and smart and thoughtful the candidates are, right? And because they're in Astartes, because they're never in actual danger, right? And in a lot of ways, nor is the kid really in danger. You know, I would imagine there's probably a 1 in 100,000 chance that the kid successfully kills him, and there's probably a 1 in 100 chance that the Astartes kills the kid, right? The kid's just like too enthusiastic, can't chill out, or the kid makes a really bad mistake. Maybe he's setting up a trap and he falls in his own trap and gets killed. But I think overall, of all the trials I've heard, this seems to be one of the most reasonable and is going to give the Astartes the most direct data on those candidates while minimizing the amount of luck that plays a part.
Completely impossible as this may seem, that individual usually will hold some unusual or rare power and will go on to become a legendary hero of the chapter. The aspirant will also usually be armed, while the Space Marine unarmed and without his power armor. Still, as with most of the former trials, the test here is really about if they can just survive at all, not so much best their opponent. Other arguably more horrific tests though could be non-combat based and test a recruit's strength, speed, mental skill or resistance to toxins. So they might for example be forced to drink nightmarish toxic chemicals, lift weights so heavy they break their bones apart, or evade some kind of horrific dangerous trap. Recruits deemed to have succeeded by whatever standards, however unlikely, will then be restored by chapter apothecaries. Ultramarines and again Imperial Fists favour these trials.
Yeah, I guess I'm just this process seems really logistically poor. But, you know, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that, like, even in modern militaries, right, tradition sometimes, very often, takes a backseat to common sense and real careful planning. So it could be just a case of, like, 10,000 years ago, some idiot Space Marine was like, we're going to make our aspirants drink toxic gas. And then over time, it became an insane ritual, sort of, despite the fact that very obviously the ability to, not get killed by toxic gas is like a measure of just some genetic quirk. You haven't actually selected for smart, capable, cool under pressure, teamwork Space Marines.
Clearly, a great many recruits will not survive this stage of assessment, but even those who fail to be accepted but by some miracle survive will usually be heavily respected for having done so, not just by their families and friends, but by the assessing Astartes. Having done no wrong but maybe just not made the cut, these surviving but unsuccessful aspirants who were assessed on their home world may return to their former communities, a rare occurrence. Or they may continue on to serve the chapter as a serf, a menial but loyal servant who takes personal care of, say, a marine's armour and weaponry. Those return to their homes.
Oh, okay, that was a really important question. Do they have a retinue of maintenance personnel?
Are extremely few, but surprisingly are not perceived as failures. It would be made clear to all that having just survived, they have shown sheer strength and integrity as an Imperial citizen. They would then likely go on to become a strong leader for that world as Imperial Guard, Planetary Defense Force, or some other leadership.
Okay, that's interesting because that is a lot like the outlook of the individuals who attend Special Forces selection. That's another course that, again, is like a real-world version of this. It involves a lot of physical training, a lot of tests of very basic infantry skills. I don't even mean weapons. I mean like land navigation, the ability to receive new information and sort of act on it, the ability to follow directions, definitely the ability to make a plan, the ability to push yourself physically, and most importantly, they select for the ability to work as a team. But at the end of the day, right, with selection, there's only so many spots, right? Every year, every cycle, they say, hey, we need to add X number of new Green Beret enlisted, X number of new Green Beret officers, and if you pass, there's still no guarantees that you're going to have a spot. You could be the best candidate in the world, and they could say, hey, this cycle, 2 spots, and it's 2 generals' kids, right? Not uncommon. But when you go back to your line unit, having completed SFAS, the respect that you earn from your peers is tremendous. And there's no tab, there's no anything, right? They don't give you any rewards for having made it through SFAS and been a non-select. But just the intestinal fortitude to go out there and shoot your shot, the courage it takes, the toughness of just lasting through this training and never quitting, it garners considerable respect, right? And actually, fun story, again, this is one of the reasons why I have so many questions about testing individual combat abilities, is that I had a very good friend in the military who was, no joke, a warehouse supervisor. He had been a Division II wrestler in college, super smart guy, and just it happened to be the year he commissioned, based on what he had ranked his priorities, they were like logistics, right? And it's important, man. Logistics needs some real great people. You never want to have an army where all your elite are in the infantry, and then you have people who are totally disorganized and non-functional in your logistics and support branches. That's a recipe for disaster. But this dude, worked hard, took every opportunity he could to get more training, distinguished himself actually in a couple of different interesting ways in his unit, but ultimately with only one really tactical, light, small infantry, small unit tactics course under his belt, went to SFAS as a person who, again, whose primary military schooling had been logistics and had been running a parts warehouse for helicopters. And the dude was a select, right? It was actually kind of funny. He came back and he just texted me to get breakfast. And I'm like, oh, I haven't seen you in a while. Where you been? He goes, yeah, I went to selection. I was like, oh, did you prepare for it? He's like, I really should have. And he's like, but I got selected. And I'm like, you're crazy, dude. Anyway, the point of all that story is to say that you can't sit there and be like, okay, you can't select for skills. You've got to select for something internal, because it's easy to teach a smart, dedicated person skills, but no amount of skill training is going to give you grit and heart and determination, right? And that's the challenge of selecting elite soldiers.
Successful aspirants will now become neophytes. They will move on to the next stage, where they'll begin the early stages of conversion to a full Space Marine with the initial implantation of the gene seed.
Okay, we're getting into the gene seeds, but real quick first, I just want to let you guys know, as you can see, new shirts are in, right? Had another artist do this. It's all the units of the Imperium forming a nice little Aquila. Of course, be sure to check out my second channel, follow me on Instagram, check out my Patreon, check out the merch store, I also got the cup, right? And do whatever you can to help support the channel. It's a small channel, you see, and every like, every comment, every subscription makes a huge difference to me, and I really do see it. So thank you guys.
And chemical adaptation of their genetically enhanced organs. This could mean immediate departure with a Space Marine brother to the next phase, or it may be that they are allowed to celebrate in their home community before departure. A very huge moral boost for the Imperial community there, and also to help reinforce Imperial values and loyalty. To be able to say your community gained a successful Astartes recruit is no small thing, and statues, paintings, songs and stories will be told for many years, if not generations to come.
That's pretty interesting, actually, and that seems like a really authentic thing, right? It's a huge deal for any community to have someone be selected, right? You see, the analogy in the U.S. is, I think, would probably be something like astronauts. If you drive around through towns through the Midwest, you see even astronauts from 2 generations ago. They still have big placards out front, such and such town in Kansas. Fakeville, Kansas, home of the astronaut Joe Snuffy. So, yeah, that's absolutely realistic. And it helps bind people together. It creates a sense of national unity. It creates a sense of real investment in these sort of national missions and projects that can usually seem very, very distant.
Neophytes will be expected to engage in training for combat as well as other mental training, as well as following chapter lore. If a neophyte should break chapter lore through ignorance or unthinkably by deliberately doing so, they will expect severe punishments. A neophyte breaking chapter lore will not simply be thrown out, they would likely be mind scrubbed, live out their lives as either, best case scenario, chapter serfs, being menial servants, or worse, forcible amputation and body conversion to life as cybernetic drones and slaves as servitors.
Jesus. Learn your law immediately. Again, sounds like something where you should select for someone who can learn quickly and follow the rules, which, again, if you think about it, making your aspirants just knife fight each other 100 times, you're not going to select for people who can read and quickly internalize, I imagine, pages and pages of chapter law.
Successful neophytes immediately will begin conditioning to be implanted with their gene seeds and relevant genetic enhancements. Space Marines must be male because the gene seed is only compatible with male hormones and genetics. So no, you won't see female Space Marines. The neophytes also need to be tested for compatibility. I'm always kind of surprised that this doesn't happen before the recruitment trials, but anyway, so they're tested for compatibility.
Yeah, again, this is just like revealing the fact that it's logistically so poorly run, but it's still the process. Here's my theory, anyway, that I'm starting to piece together, is that these were set 10,000 years ago, maybe during the second founding of these chapters, and maybe a lot of that institutional knowledge of how and why we do these rituals sort of got lost, and so it became replaced with just sort of cobbling it together as best the chapters could guess. I mean, I imagine if you had 100,000 Marine Legion, right, you probably had an entire office that all they did was identify candidates, select them, and take them through the medical steps. And when you broke apart into 1,000 chapters, I'm imagining it's a room of 1,000 Astartes looking at each other being like, does anybody know how to create another one of us? Do we have sex? Does one of us get pregnant? Like, how does this work? And so they just have to rely instead of on a plan that makes sense, right, from start to finish. They just have to kind of make it up. And then once they made it up the first time, no one ever tried to improve on it. That's the only way I can explain these like logistical, nonsensical failures. Like, right, you took them off the stinking planet, and now you're going to see if they're compatible with a gene seed? Like, damn, dude, figure it out before. Because like you said, you took one of the planet's future elite warriors, you know? They could still serve the Imperium, but instead, because you didn't do a 23andMe on them, like, you're going to, what, turn them into a serf? An equipment maintainer? Like, this is ridiculous.
Otherwise,
Ridiculously poorly thought out. I mean, everything in Warhammer is, ridiculous.
as with organ transplants, rejection would be fatal for the neophyte. Even with this testing, it can still happen later down the line. They will then further have their mental strength checked before implantation of the gene seed begins to ensure that they are in no way compromised by the forces of chaos.
Alright guys, we are going to stop it there. I think it's about to get real weird. But who doesn't love weird, right? And nothing is as interesting as the weirdness that comes from making an Astartes, pumping them full of all kinds of weird genes. Now, what's not clear from this video, and I hope gets clearer, is that is the process of changing the biology of a normal human into an Astartes, it's got to be gradual over time, right? Again, I need the lore experts to let me know. Is this something that's going to happen over the span of, 10 years, 100 years? It seems like to change the biology that fundamentally, you would have to just give it time, right? A human being would have to have their growth plates return, right, unfused, and they'd have to grow taller. You're talking about basically triggering a second puberty. So, anyway, we're going to find out, I'm sure. But the stuff that Luton, of course, I'm sure glossed over, please let me know in the comments if the lore has an explanation for any of the other nonsense. And be sure to hit like on the video. And, check out the other channel, the Instagram, the merch store, and the Patreon. And until next time, I will see you guys later.